welcome back, knitters. This is Jana. So this is block 3 of our long-term 20 block knit along of Norah's vintage Afghan. So like I mentioned, there's 20 blocks in all. This is number 3, so this is a long-term commitment, but you can jump in anytime. You can start with this one with block number 3 if you want and go back and knit 1 and 2 later. I'll put all the links down below in the video description, so be sure, and also go check out the Afghan prep video. If this is your first block, you'll want to watch that one first. Regardless of where you're starting in the knit along, definitely watch the prep video first. Okay, the other thing I want to mention is that there is a more updated version of the pattern. This is version 7 on the Barocco website. I'll have the link down below for that as well. I originally printed version 5, and now I'm going back to double check that I have the latest version, and I'm printing the chart. I'm waiting to print the chart until the block, or until the month in which we're knitting that block. So I have not printed chart 4 yet. I'll do that next month. So I hope that makes sense. Okay, also, I'm going to be going slowly through the cables. They're color coded. And so I'm going to go through each one and show you how it's done. I'm not going to film the entire chart, but I am going to make sure to highlight each type of cable that's used in this chart. Now, if you're new to chart reading, I'll put a video link down below for a slower tutorial that I have on how to read a knitting chart, but you can follow along here as well. Okay, I want to give a special shout out to 4 of our patrons: Karen Murphy, Tamara Zimmerman, Vicki McLean, and Roxanne Gary. Definitely thank you for all your support for Purl Together, and your financial support helps keep these videos coming every single week. So if you're interested in becoming a patron like these 4 gals did, hop on over to patreon.com/Purl Together and see what I'm offering in exchange for your financial support. All right, let's get started. All right, as with the first 2 blocks, block 3 starts out the same way, where we have the first 4 rows of garter stitch. The 5th row is the knit 1, purl 1 texture, and then 6 through 9 is garter stitch as well. So now we're on the increase row, which is just the knit 2, make 1, 27 times, ending with knit 3. So that would get us increased up to 84 stitches. So we'll go ahead and do that, and then we'll take a look at the chart. All right, Simon has arrived to help. Okay, knit 2, and then when I make 1, just as I have with the other squares, I'm just going to do the make 1 bar increase, where I take my left needle in from the front underneath the bar, knit into the back of that. Now you'll notice I did that little rolling maneuver. That's just my habit to have a way to get into the back of a stitch without splitting it. So when you go in and you lift that stitch, rather than trying to poke in like that, which you can if you have sharp enough needles, and I do, you can certainly manage that. If your needles are a little dull and you don't want to risk splitting your stitches, you can just go in underneath like this and then kind of roll your needles around each other, and that achieves the same positioning to knit into the back loop. All right, I'm going to continue knit 2, make 1 all the way across until I have 3 stitches left. At first glance, chart 3 looks pretty daunting, but what I want to point out is, unlike some of these other squares where you're just repeating the same 12 rows, they have actually printed all 69 rows on the same page, so that's why it looks more complicated than it really is. But if you'll notice, really, there's a whole section in here in the middle, and there's lots of rows that are just knits and purls, so that's really going to be less tedious, I think, than block 2 was. So one thing I want to point out real quick is when you begin the chart, you're going to start row 1, and that is on the wrong side. As with previous blocks, after the increase row, we begin the chart on the wrong side. So I'll put a link down below for how to read a knitting chart when you're going back and forth. But when we're on the wrong side, we begin over here on the left and we knit across this way. So keep that in mind. And then we go up 1 row, and then we go back across, and up 1 row and back across. We're not knitting in the round, so we do have to go back and forth in the same way that you turn your work when you're knitting back and forth. So just make sure to familiarize yourself with the key and know that, you know, these are going to be all pretty clearly spelled out, that this blue cable, for example, is, you know, very clearly instructed here with what to do, and we'll go through them all. So let's begin the chart down here with row 1, and keeping in mind that the knits are dots and the blank squares are purls on the wrong side. Now this bracket right here indicates we're going to work those 4 stitches 3 times. So it's basically, I'm just going to count 12 stitches as ribbing, and then move on to the purl 3 that are these blank spots. Okay, I've knitted through this first 18 stitches up to here, and I will go ahead and tell you, to save you the counting, that there are 21 knit stitches on the wrong side, 21 dots all the way across here, and then you have your 6 stitches in the middle panel, and then 21 across here. So just to save you the counting. Okay, before we get too far into row 4 and subsequent rows that contain cables, I want to point out a couple of things about the symbols that you can decode just by looking at them without even having to read the corresponding instructions. For example, on this orange one, you know that's going to contain a purl stitch, not because I see the P1 right there, but because it has a dot that on the right side of the chart denotes a purl stitch. And I know that it leans to the left, and that I'm going to slip stitches and hold them to the front so that they cross over to the left. Now this one, the pink one, doesn't have any purl stitches because there's no dots. And I also know that it's going to go across more stitches will be used to make this cable than in this one, just because it's a longer rectangle symbol. So while I might not know exactly how many, I know that it is going to become a bigger cable than this one. I know that this one, kind of darker red here, will have 2 purl stitches and it'll be a right leaner. So as I'm knitting, I'm going to slip stitches and hold them to the back, and then I'll have the 2 that are coming from the left needle crossing over to the right. Now, one thing to note as well is the cable stitches. The cables are going to be worked on the right side rows. So see how they're all alternating, right side, wrong side, right side, wrong side. The wrong side rows are going to be a resting row, so to speak, so that you're only working the cables on the even numbered right side rows. Okay, so just some things to keep in mind there, and it might help things go a little bit easier. Now this first one we're going to come to is a blue symbol here. So that's slip 1 stitch to the cable needle and hold it to the back, and then knit 3, and then knit that one off the cable needle. Now you can use a cable needle certainly, or you can implement the techniques we've talked about in the first 2 block tutorials and do it without a cable needle, which is probably what I will do for some of these that are, just 1 or 2. And I'm just going to go along and see whether I prefer to do a cable needle or not. All right, so we're starting with row 4. I've completed row 3, and you can tell I've got this great big background in the middle where all this cabled stuff's going to take place pretty much. And then you have this center band that's going to provide some accent right up the middle. So on row 4, you'll notice too, you have the garter stitch that we've been having on the edge, where we have a knit, a purl and a knit, a purl and a knit, a purl and a knit. So you want to carry on with that. Okay, so the first 15 stitches of row 4 are just knits and purls as we've been working on. All right, so the yellow cable symbol indicates I'm going to slip 3 to a cable needle, hold to the front, and you can certainly do that. Take those first 3 and hold them to the front. And then I'm going to knit 1. So I'm going to have to get a hold of this purl stitch right here. So I'm going to go in from behind. If I'm doing this without a cable needle, I'm going to go in from behind like that. I'm going to pinch all 3 of these down in the row below, I'm holding this firmly against the right hand needle while I slip off the left hand needle, and then go right back in and pick all 3 of those back up. And so that leans them all to the left, and I'm just bringing the other one around behind, and then it instructs me to knit it. So I'm going to take that to the back, knit that one, and then knit the next 3. So that one I split a little bit. Let me make sure to fix that, straighten it out. Okay, so that was easy enough. Now I'm going to purl all those ones along the middle until I get to that center panel of 6 knit stitches. That's pretty easy to see. I don't even need to count those. You can count all the purl dots if you want to, but again, I can plainly see that band of 6 knit stitches right in the row, so I'm going to know when to stop. Same with the other side. Now I want to point out that going back across here, there are a whole string of purl stitches, and I didn't count them on this end of the row, and I'm not going to count them on this end. I can see that there's a column of 3 knit stitches here, so I'm just going to stop purling when I get to one before that column. So by reading my knitting, I can just know that I'm going to have my 3 knit stitch column here, and I'm going to stop purling when I get to this last stitch there. So you can certainly take the time to count them if you wish. All right, now I've knitted my way, or purled my way up to where that blue symbol is, and it says slip 1 stitch to the cable needle and hold to the back. Knit 3, and then knit the one from the cable needle. So if you're using cable needles, just slip that off onto the cable needle, hold it to the back. And since I'm not, I'm going to go ahead and go in front of this, grab a hold of all 3 of these knit stitches here. I'm going to pinch that stitch. I'm going to pinch it below the stitch itself, slip out my working needle, and go and pick that up again, and then bring all 3 of those over to the right, slip them back off. So now I've just simply changed their order in which they're going to be knitted. Whoops, take my yarn to the back so I can knit those 3, and then I'm going to knit that 4th one as well. Okay. Now I'm just going to simply knit the knits and purl the purls until I get to the very last stitch, which will be a knit in keeping with the garter stitch edge, that 1 column of garter stitch on the very edge. All right, rewind that if you need to see how I did that, or alternatively, you can certainly use a cable needle if you don't want to risk dropping anything. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So that completes row 4. Row 5 is just going to be carrying along with the chart, making sure you're reading the chart correctly from left to right on the wrong side row. On row 6, I've knitted up to 1 stitch past that vertical red line that indicates the repeat for, this ribbing kind of section we have going on here. And now I'm to that, well, every printer is different, so I don't even know what to call these symbols. But I'm to the red-ish one that leads to the left and has 2 little dots right there at the beginning of row 6. Now I know there's going to be some purls involved, and it's, again, I always say this, but it's helpful to read your knitting. I know that this is worked over 5 stitches because that symbol covers 5 squares, and I know that these 2 purls right here are going to be involved. So it's very rare that you would have purls on the front of a cable. So I know that these 3 stitches here are going to cross over the top of those 2 purl stitches. So again, use a cable needle if you like. I'm just going to go in behind here and get a hold of those purl stitches, being careful not to grab anything on the knit ones. So I've got a hold of those 2 purl stitches. I'm going to press my thumb to the bottom of those knit stitches and hold those while I get my left hand needle around and back into them. And then we'll just bring those purl stitches back over to the right, so we're changing position, and then we're going to purl those back off. Purl those off and then knit the 3. And now just work your way across to the raspberry colored cable symbol where we're going to do something very, very similar. All right, after I've knitted across the center of that, again, I'm not counting how many purl stitches these are. You can certainly if you want, but I know I need to stop 2 before that column of knit stitches. So I know that now this raspberry colored symbol indicates that I'm going to have 3 stitches brought to the right, and I'm going to need to have these 2 purl stitches here go behind. So that's easy to figure out. And again, you can certainly read the instructions next to the symbols. It's going to just tell you to slip these 2 off and hold them to the back. So I'm going to go under here and grab these 3 knit stitches, pressing below the stitches here, pressing these into my working needle so I can get my left needle out and then back in. Bring those over to the right, take them off, and there we have it. Knit those 3, purl 2 off the cable needle if we were using a cable needle, and then we're just going to finish out our row as written. So do 1 and then begins our little side section here. So you can see it doesn't have to be as daunting as it first appears. You can see what's going on if you just learn to read the fabric that you're making. You can see what's going to happen and be able to anticipate that. All right, I'm on row 8 and I've gotten through this side section and I'm up to the first brown symbol now, which is a 3/3 cable, where I'm going to be slipping these 3 knit stitches to the front and pulling them across these next 3 purl stitches. So when it gets to a bigger cable, I do probably revert more to a cable needle just to ensure that I don't drop anything. That would be bad. Now, despite the fact that these are purl stitches, the pattern tells me to slip 3 to the cable needle, hold to the front, and then I'm knitting these. Even though they're purl stitches currently, I'm going to make them into knit stitches per the directions. And you're not going to notice that so much because it'll be in the background behind these 3 here. So you won't notice the purl bumps that are underneath. All right, and then we're just going to continue purling across to the middle. Now again, if you just notice what's underneath the previous rows, you can count these if you want to, but I know that I'm going to stop purling when I get one before that center column of 6. And then we've seen those symbols before. Those are just 3/1 going to the right and going to the left. So this first one is going to split off and go to the right. So I have this purl stitch that I'm going to leave in the back, and I'm going to go grab these 3 here, pressing my finger below the purl stitch on the right, slip those off, get a hold of that again, and just swap places with all of those. And then we're just going to knit these right off and purl the 4th one. Whoops, there we go. Be careful not to split anything here. Oh, nope, we're not purling that, are we? Nope, we're knitting that. We're changing that into a knit stitch. My first clue there should have been that there's no dots in that blue symbol indicating a purl stitch. So now we're going to do the opposite is true, where we're going to grab a hold of the purl stitch on the left, being careful not to snag any of those. Pinch those down on my right needle, pick them all back up and switch places. And that's going to be a knit stitch there as well. Whoops, 1. Okay. And now we're going to purl our way back across that larger section, this time stopping 3 before the end of our purl panel, if you will, so that we can do our 3/3 cable leaning to the right. So if it's going to lean to the right, I'm going to slip 3 purl stitches, hold them to the back, and I know already that that's how we make something lean to the right, is by taking the stitches on the left and crossing them over the ones on the right. So again, I think I'm going to go ahead and use my cable needle for these. You can do it the same way we've been doing the 2x2s and the 3/1s. Either way, if you want to try it, then go for it. Okay, now it says knit 3 from the cable needle. Despite that they were purl stitches, I'm going to knit those off. Okay, now just continue the way we have been to the end of the row. I'm about to begin row 10, and you can really see things starting to shift and move. Here we had these column of stitches, and the one is going to stay here and the others are going to travel off to the left to start creating our twining cabled pattern. So as I begin row 10, you'll notice now that we have this lime green symbol that's coming up that's going to include 1 purl stitch. Okay, I'm at the lime green symbol at the beginning of row 10. Well, not exactly the beginning. I've knitted through this ribbing side panel and so forth. But I'm at the lime green symbol that also contains a purl dot, meaning some of this cable will contain purls. So slip 3 to the front, and you can do this with or without a cable needle. When it's more than, 4 or 5 stitches, I generally will use a cable needle. Not always, it just depends on the circumstances and how I'm feeling about it. So slip 3 off, purl the next 3, and then we'll knit 3 from the cable needle. So now we're making a larger 3x3 cross to the left. Okay, and then we're going to purl across our center background here. stopping 2 stitches short of the next knit section. Whoops, sorry about being off camera there. I got started going and not really paying attention. Okay, now that light pink one is going to indicate that is a 2 by 3. Okay, so we're going to slip these 2 to the back if you're using a cable needle. I'm going to go in and get these next 3 knit stitches, pinching the purl stitches below from the next row down. Slip my left needle out and then back into those purl stitches, changing positions with the, whoops, I got a little bit of a split. Okay, there we go. Now I'm going to knit those. And if you were using a cable needle, then I'm also going to knit these 2 from the cable needle if I had one. Okay, knit the next 2 that's in the center. All right. Now we want these 3 to cross over these 2 purl stitches. So this is a 3 over 2. All right. Now I'm going to go behind those 3, get a hold of the next 2 purl stitches. I always like to double check, make sure I'm actually behind those and I haven't inadvertently picked up one. Switch places with all of that carefully. Okay, now, do the instructions want me to purl that or knit it? I'm going to knit those 2 and then just knit the next 3. And I should be back on my way to purling across that background panel. Now, I call that a background panel because often the background is purl stitches and then your cables are knit stitches, giving them a raised effect. And the purl sections tend to look like a background compared to this raised up cable, or the ones that are traveling. So I'm going to work my way across here, stopping 3 short of the next knit section. Okay, need to do 1 or 2 more here. Okay, there's 3 short. All right, now I'm going to do a similar cable, similar to that light green one, where we're going to take these 3 to the back and bring the next 3 across the front. 3, hold to the back. Now I'm going to knit these 3. And purl 3 from the cable needle. So this is really very simple if you just take your time and pay attention to the colors of the symbols and the key, the corresponding key. There we go. Now I have knit 3 and I'm going to continue my side panel to the end of the row. Then we'll do row 11 and see how things are looking. Okay, so we're going to continue knitting through the chart. When I come to a color of a cable symbol that we haven't talked about yet, I will pause and tell you what row I'm on, and I'll specifically show you how to accomplish that. The other thing I'm going to show you here in row 12 is how to tink back a cable if you make a mistake. I've made a mistake on purpose here so that I can show you how to tink back a cable. What I've done here is I've knitted a 3 by 3, 3 over 3 cable rather than what the pattern calls for, which was a 2 over 2. So let's say I need to take out this cable. All I'm going to do is tink back. We know how to tink back regular purl stitches by just going in underneath and slipping those off. So tinking back a cable is no different. You just need to read your knitting a little bit. You can tell that these have been stretched across to the left and that they're knitted. So I'm going to push that stitch forward so I can see where to go in with my cable needle. And I'm doing that because I want to bring them to the front. I need to undo the position change. So I'm going to take those 3 off and let them hang to the front. You can tell that that's where they want to go. Then I'll take out the 3, and I know it's 3, not 2, because I can actually see the hole where I've pulled this across. All right, now I need to rectify the situation by making it a 2 over 2 cable, not 3. So I need to take one of these back and slip them over here as if none of that ever happened. Actually, it's 3 over 2. My mistake. I'm at the dark blue symbol at the first cable symbol at the beginning of row 12. Let me fix that little bit of a strand there also. So I want 3 in the, holding to the front. 3 holding to the front, knit 2. Okay, then pull these across, and I'm going to knit these 3 off. So tinking back a cable is no different than tinking back anything else. It just requires a little bit of patience. And if you'll notice, I'm pulling that toward me a little bit to add a little bit of extra yarn into the loop, just so that this cable doesn't pucker and it's not super tight. All right, so now the pattern wants me to purl 4 and do the next cable that leans to the right. That's that kind of dark purple or magenta-ish color. And that's worked over 6 stitches. Slipping 3 to the cable needle and holding to the back. And I knew that because these were purl stitches. Most likely they'll go to the back. We don't normally bring purl stitches to the front over the top of knit stitches when you're doing a cable motif. We also know that these knit stitches are going to be in the front because it's the slant of that symbol tells me that we're going to the right with them. All right, now I'm going to knit 3 here, then I'll purl 3 from the cable needle. Okay, bringing my yarn back to the front, purl 3 from the cable needle. Whoops, let me get a hold of that again. All right, okay, now I'm going to knit the 6 in the center. So none of these symbols now in this particular row are new, so I'm going to go ahead and work through some more of the chart. When I encounter a new color, a new cable symbol that we haven't talked about yet, then I'll show you. All right, I'm on row 14 and I've knitted up to that kind of light orange colored cable symbol. And this is very similar to ones we've done in the past where we're just going to go in behind here and get a hold of this purl stitch. If you're using a cable needle, slip these first 3 off onto it and hold them to the front. And I'm going to go back in with my working needle and pick those up. All right, now we're going to purl the 1 from the back and knit the 3 off of the cable needle if you're using one. Okay, now is that magenta symbol again where we're going to do a 3 over 3 with knits and purls. So if you want to see how to do that without a cable needle, it's a little bit sketchy, but I'm going to kind of push everything off to the right end of this and hang on to this with your index finger so you don't lose anything off of it while you're maneuvering your right hand needle under those knit stitches. Pinch below the purl stitches, sneak your left needle out, and then picking up all 3 of those again so you can switch places with the sets of 3. All right, knit the first 3 and then purl the next 3 that would have been on your cable needle. Being careful not to split a stitch like I almost did. And then we're going to purl and knit our way across the center. We'll have some of those green symbols that we haven't encountered. I think we have one there that we have not encountered yet before, but again, it appears to be a 3 over 1 with a purl thrown in. So that's simple enough. But first we're going to do the light green one, which is, oh wait, I still have 3 more to purl here. And then the light green one is going to be 3 knit stitches to the front and pulling those across over these other 3 purl stitches. So if I'm not using a cable needle, I'm going to go in and get a hold of those 3 purls. Whoops. See, that's why it's a little more difficult with more stitches. And the reason for that is because I have to push all of these way closer to this edge in order to get a hold of the ones back here where the needle is tapered enough to allow me to do that. So yeah, I really don't like doing that. So I'm just going to take those 3 and hold them to the front. It's much safer than worrying about dropping anything like I did. I was able to rescue it, obviously. So purl the next 3, and then we're going to pull these over and knit them off. And that was the light green symbol on row 14. Now we have a dark green symbol, which means slip one to the cable needle, hold it in back, and knit the next 3. So we have this lone purl stitch. Use your cable needle if you like, and slip that to the back. Then we're gonna knit these next 3. I'm gonna go grab that one, being careful not to split it. Bring those around. Okay, knit these next 3 and purl that one off the cable needle if you're using one. All right, now we're just going to go finish out our row. I'm at the beginning of row 16, and I think we've knitted through all of the symbols. You can clearly see what's starting to happen here. We're going to be crossing over. These cables will cross over. This one will cross over to the right, over the top, and this one will cross over to the left. And you can tell that by just looking at the symbols. So I'm going to knit through the rest of the chart. Certainly if you have any questions, post in the group if any of that's not clear, and we'll see what it looks like here shortly. Over halfway through the chart, I've completed 40 rows, and so I'm through the just knit purl section in the middle. That went nice and fast, and that was a welcome reprieve from, you know, the more complicated cables that we've been doing lately. Not necessarily in this square, but certainly I thought block number 2 was a lot more tedious than this one's going by much more quickly. Okay, so I'll finish up the chart and then we'll repeat those same garter stitch rows that we began with down here, and then I'll show you what it looks like when I'm done. All right, I finished the chart, and now I'm just doing the decrease row where we knit 1, knit 2 together, knit 1, knit 2 together, all the way across 27 times until you have 3 stitches left, and then you just finish up by knitting those 3. Then we'll go and finish up our block in the same way we began by just doing those rows of garter stitch, the 1 row of texture, knit, purl, and then 4 more rows of garter stitch, and then our bind off. Thanks for joining me for block number 3. If you have any questions, drop me a comment down below, and absolutely feel free to join the Purl Together groups on Facebook and Ravelry. I'll be happy to answer your questions over there. We also have a wealth of experienced knitters joining us all the time, so there's usually somebody around to help if you need help with this block or any other knit along or project that you're working on. We're happy to take a look. If you find these videos helpful, click that subscribe button, and also join us over on patreon.com/Purl Together.